Hello again. We are so happy to have one of DC's top attorneys with us once again. We have Michael Forrester from Forrester Law. Hello, sir. Thank you for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Cedric?
Fantastic, sir. Thank you for making the time.
Thank
This
you.
is, I think this one right here, this will probably be one of our top searched, viewed, most useful videos that we probably ever do because there's this connection between these two areas that we know so much about. We kind of joke about it because it's so common. And I can't believe, honestly, it took us this long to talk about it. And so for those of you watching, you're like, what is he on about? Well, today we're talking about property in North Carolina. Okay, so you're in DC and you are the personal representative for an estate, and that person owned property in North Carolina. How often does this happen, Mike?
This happens all the time, and I'm going to start by saying that this information applies in whatever state it is. We're calling it North Carolina just because it seems like 8 out of 10 times when someone comes to me in DC with a family member owning property somewhere else, it seems like the next words out of their mouth are North Carolina. So we're calling it that, but keep in mind, if you had property in South Carolina or Georgia or Michigan or any other state, it's basically the same, process. But so that's how I would sort of caveat it. And the question is, okay, they have land here, they lived here. Where do we go? Where do we start? What do we do?
Yeah.
And the rule is you always start where they live, where their residence was. So if they had property in North Carolina, but they lived and died in DC, then you open up an estate in DC. You get special copies of the documents from the DC court, and then you need to go over to North Carolina courts and open up or whatever state and open up a foreign estate there with those documents. Now, I'm not licensed in North Carolina. I have DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So you would need another attorney or to figure it out yourself. But that's how you start that process and get it going.
Okay. So this applies to any state, but we know that because there's so much discussion and that connection exists between DC and North Carolina, obviously that's the one we're talking about today. I'm not licensed in North Carolina either. I work with a couple of agents out there that are pretty good. I guess it depends. I mean, North Carolina's huge. So
yeah,
several agents down there. It's just like, what part, what county? So
right. And it depends on the county too, where you need to file it in North Carolina. So or
right.
whatever. So you need to figure out what county you're dealing with before figuring out, and whether where it needs to go from after you get it started in DC.
Right. Okay. And so, as is often the case, I know with you and I, we've helped a lot of families together locally, and even on those cases when someone has a probate property and estate property in the DC area that they have decided that the family wants to sell. Well, oftentimes there's more than one decision maker. And so if that person has a property in DC and additional properties, more commonly land in North Carolina, well, what does that process look like when there are multiple heirs for that land in North Carolina?
So sometimes it'll come up. They'll be like, oh, my uncle owned this land in North Carolina, but it turns out their uncle owned it with their aunt, or their uncle owned it with cousins or other people. So again, it would vary by the state as far as what needs to happen, but the other people would have to be on board as well. Even if they had a fractional interest, they'd have to get, they might have to open other estates. You might have to get in contact with people you haven't talked to in a long time. Sometimes people have lost touch with other owners. You might need to hire an investigator or somehow find these other people. So it can get complicated, and hopefully the value of the land or whatever exceeds the cost of going through this legal, wranglings to get you in the right place to do it. But, the sooner you act, the better, because, the longer people wait, the more people have died and the more complicated and the more heirs pop up. So, if you have an elderly relative who owns part of a land, you might want to try to get that addressed while they're alive, while they're able to move around and do things. Because the sooner the better. With time, it only gets more complicated. So I always encourage people to get going quickly if they can.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, and so now you brought up something interesting, and so I have to ask about this. Well, what if the person that you're working with, the client, they are the one that has land in North Carolina, right? So this is they're
Yeah,
alive, they're
right.
feeling great, but they are that individual that has somehow, maybe it was through a transfer from, maybe they're the heir or something like that. And so now they have land in North Carolina, and hopefully they're talking to you about estate planning because they should all be doing that. So what does that look like for
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. So if you yourself owns land in other states, you can obviously, you could sell it if you wanted to. If you wanted to pass it on, you'd want to include it in your will. If you wanted to pass it on without having to go through this process that we just talked about, you might want to set up a trust and put it in the trust. People that own land in multiple states, I often think are given the extra step of opening multiple estates. I recommend doing a trust often if you have that, because you can avoid two probates potentially. So always have it as part of your plan, and make sure that it's included in what you want to do.
I think we should, at some point in the near future, I think we should do a bit of a deeper dive on trust, because there's a lot of power, and that's a useful tool that a lot of people, frankly, don't know about. So I'm
Yeah,
glad that you brought that up. And
yeah.
so just to repeat what you said, if you did a trust, it would save you from having to do two probates. Is that what you said?
That's correct. If you have land in another state, or house in another state, and you're able to put it into the trust, then yes, you would save multiple proceedings that your heirs would have to go through.
So that's
Much
multiple,
simpler process.
right? Multiple proceedings, multiple filings, and multiple monies,
Right.
right?
Multiple attorneys, perhaps. Who wants to hire two attorneys?
Multiple attorneys. So and so basically the trust pays for itself is what you're saying. Okay.
Definitely.
And I know you deal with trust, right? Obviously, because
Oh
you brought
yeah.
it up.
Yeah. I've done it multiple times. The only issue is, to put a house or land in North Carolina or any other state into the trust, you need to do a deed. And again, I'm not licensed in that. So we might need to partner with a different attorney as part of that process, but it's much simpler of a process than doing it, after the fact. So
Yeah.
still happy to connect and figure out how to get that together.
No, that just makes sense. That's just good business. And if you have health insurance, then you should have something like this in place, because it's all about being proactive and thinking ahead of a situation.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. All of that is really great, man.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the long and short of the North Carolina land situation, huh?
Yeah, yes, it is. And if anyone has any questions, they can feel free to reach out to me. I'm at michael@forsterlawfirm.com, forsterlawfirm.com, or area code 202-400-2489 if they want to get in touch, and we can, help set you up.
You should get a lot of calls after this one, because folks have land everywhere. Like you said, land everywhere, but absolutely North Carolina.
That's right. I'm not picking a side in UNC versus Duke either. So I'm neutral on the sports teams there.
There
But
you go. Yep, it's all love. Yeah. All right. Well, they know how to reach you, and they know you have the knowledge. So folks, feel free to reach out to Michael so you can plan properly for your family and get all your needs met. Michael, thank you again for taking the time, man. This has been a good one. I'm sure folks will benefit from this, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Great. Thanks so much for your time, Cedric.
All right, buddy. Take care.